From Ukraine, global powers are now shifting their attention to the South Pacific, a region that appears as small dots on the world map, but is actually a large strategic area. And the players in the tussle are the old China versus the US and its allies. And leading the Pacific battle against China this time is America's court partner, Australia. Both Australia and China have launched visits in the Pacific. Xi Jinping's top diplomat, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, is on a 10-day tour to 8 Pacific Island countries. China recently signed security pacts with the Solomon Islands, despite objections from Australia, the US, Japan, and even New Zealand, a country that has mostly maintained distance from the ongoing strategic wars. And these countries fear it could give China a military presence in the region. Australia has also worked in recent years to revitalize its leadership position in the Pacific. The Australian government is its biggest donor with the largest diplomatic footprint in the region. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong, in a trip to Fiji, has warned the Pacific countries against the consequences of signing and accepting security deals with Beijing. Fiji is the first Pacific Island country that joined US President Joe Biden's Indo-Pacific Economic Framework during the Quad Summit in Japan earlier this week. It is aimed at bolstering Washington's presence in the Asia-Pacific. The West, especially the US, has been irked by China's growing economic and geopolitical clout in the Pacific. Over the last 2 decades, Beijing has steadily built influence in the South Pacific. It is a region known for its pristine beaches, geographic and cultural diversity. 14 sovereign nations and 7 territories in the region span over 15% of the world's surface. Since the Second World War, the Pacific has largely enjoyed a benign status on the geopolitical stage, but all of that changed with China's growing presence in the region. Since 2006, China's trade, aid, and diplomatic and commercial activity in the region has been steadily scaling up. Two-way trade with China has overtaken that of Australia since 2013. For the Solomon Islands, two-way trade with China now making up 46% of all trade. In the latest, China has announced its 5-year deal to 10 island nations in the region. The deal pertains to extending security and economic cooperation. A leaked draft of the agreement claims to have a lot on the platter for these islands. The map on your screen showing the shared ocean region between China, Australia, and the 10 islands Beijing is planning to approach. So what is China offering to these countries? Let's better understand. In this deal, Beijing is offering significant financial assistance, a free trade agreement, and access to Beijing's lucrative market of 1.4 billion people. China is also mulling training the local police in these countries. But like all other deals, Chinese agreements also have a catch. And here is what Beijing is eyeing in return: access to local cybersecurity, expansion of its political influence in the region, greater access to natural resources through marine mapping. Let's also understand the risk of China's rise. The first risk, which could also have a profound impact, is that China could be trying to use its leverage through diplomacy, debt, trade, or establishing military bases in the region. A Chinese military base as little as 2,000 kilometers from Australia's coast would force a wedge between Australia and its strategic anchor, the United States. And the second risk, which has a higher probability of occurring, is that China and Chinese businesses, through elite capture and corruption, are rapidly undermining institutions of governance in countries in the region and misusing public resources for the benefit of a few individuals. But Beijing has also been struggling to maintain its momentum in the South Pacific. Traditional partners in the region are scrutinizing Chinese debt. They are wary of China's debt trap diplomacy, something that countries in South Asia, like Sri Lanka and Pakistan, have already fallen victim to. And caught between the battle of the world's superpowers are 13 million people living in 14 sovereign nations and 7 territories spanning over 15% of the world's surface, an area that plays an extremely crucial role in global climate systems, global economy, and now in global politics. And with us on the broadcast this minute is Ben Friedman from Boston. He's a policy director at Defense Priorities, a think tank based in Washington, D.C. Thanks very much for being here with us. Your assessment of this deal and the larger move by China in this region, what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's strange that we in the United States make such a big deal out of this deal, and I disagree with large swaths of your lead-in. A lot of what you just said. The introduction you gave the idea that the Pacific was a benign, peaceful place until China's rise. Now it's not. But the fact is, the Pacific remains a benign, peaceful place. There's not a war there. And what's happened is that China's gotten incredibly wealthy, as you pointed out. It's 46% of the Solomon Islands trade. And so that's indicative of what's happening around the region, which is China's become this massive trading bloc, which has given it influence. But it's not clear to me that that influence is being used in a horrible way that's destroying the livelihoods of people, let alone affecting the security of the United States. Nor is it true, I think, that they've driven a wedge strategically between Australia and the west coast of the United States. That island, if China were to establish a base in the Solomon Islands, it would primarily be vulnerable to being attacked by U.S. naval forces. And it's not clear that it would be much of a threat at all to Australia, given that it is 2,000 kilometers away. That's a long way to cross an ocean. So I think a couple deep breaths are needed. If Australia wants to make a big issue out of the Solomon Islands, cutting a deal with China, that's their prerogative. And we in the United States, I don't think, should be mad at Australia for doing that. But I don't see that it has a great deal to do with our security, or that we need to get all bent out of shape about it.
So what do you make of that pact that China has struck with the Solomon Islands? Is there more that meets the eye? Is there any reason for greater concern at this point?
Well, I think that, they see some upside in it, and I don't think that it means that they're about to take over the Pacific Ocean in a military sense. That's something obviously to keep an eye on, but they're so far behind militarily in terms of especially naval power behind the United States that China's gotten very good at defending its coastline and projecting power a few hundred kilometers away from its coast. When its Navy goes further afield, and certainly the Solomon Islands are far afield, it becomes vulnerable to all kinds of U.S. systems and the defensive systems of our allies. So it's not setting itself up to become some sort of Napoleonic France of modern Asia that kind of takes over by conquest a lot of territory. I don't think that's likely. It's a big threat to Taiwan. It's making some maritime claims, China is, that are concerning. But it's behaving like the great power that it's becoming, which is asserting its interests more broadly. But I don't think that we need to treat that as an inherently alarming outcome in global politics. I think it's something to deal with without too much alarm. Again, the United States is a long way away from China. India is a state that borders China, but not near the Solomon Islands. So, I think we can let the Solomon Islands make sovereign decisions about how they want to deal with their trade and security. And if Australia wants to object, they can object. And if they want to bribe Solomon Islands to go back the other way, which is sort of what's happening, there's a bit of a bidding war. That's their prerogative. And I think we can safely sit back and watch in both India and the United States and see what happens without saying, oh, there's a problem here that we need to urgently solve.
Ben, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast with those perspectives.
Thank you.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.